I was about 17 years old when this incident occurred in a residential neighborhood that wasn't known for having many homeless individuals. It happened at my usual smoke spot, a secluded area near a public space. On that particular day, as I was hidden in the bushes, a man unintentionally stumbled upon me. He had an appearance that was a mix of disheveled and clean, ripped but washed jeans, long hair, but neatly groomed, a big backpack but also a wallet and a phone. Initially, I assumed he was homeless. Given my age and the realities of life, I tried to be polite yet cautious. Unfortunately, he was blocking my exit, making it difficult for me to leave without walking directly past him. He struck up a conversation, asking about my thoughts on the town we lived in and other general topics. However, he soon began sharing outlandish stories. He claimed to be the love child of famous actors like James Dean and a Golden Age actress. He went on about his supposed close relationships with celebrities like Cher. Then, he took it even further, stating that he was the founder of a well-known thrift store chain called the Ark. I knew this was untrue because of my personal connections to the Ark. He showed me what he believed was evidence, old Ark business cards and other items that anyone could have picked up. He proceeded to make claims about owning numerous apartment buildings in town and offering me a cheap rental. The evidence he presented consisted of illegible notes scribbled on scraps of paper in his wallet. After enduring an hour of his continuous lies, I realized he wouldn't simply leave if I let him continue. However, I still assumed he was a lonely homeless man fabricating stories for amusement. So, I decided to create my own fabrication, claiming that I needed to go to work. I slipped past him, hoping that would be the end of our encounter, but to my dismay, he started following me towards my car, insisting that I take his business card. It turned out to be a random person's business card with his name and phone number hastily written on the back. I reluctantly took it and continued walking, with him persistently following. At this point, he began asking personal questions that raised red flags. He inquired about my living situation, whether I lived alone, with my family, or just my mother or father. He wanted to know if I had a close relationship with my family, if I was happy at home, and if I had any brothers. He specifically focused on brothers, never mentioning sisters. It seemed like he was assessing not only the level of protection I had, but also who would notice if I went missing and whether I was seeking an opportunity to run away or find someone to trust. It felt unsettling, as if he were involved in trafficking or kidnapping activities. To conclude the conversation, I told him I lived with my dad and my 3 protective brothers who loved me dearly and were into working out. He accepted my response but insisted that if I ever needed to escape home or find a place to live, I should call him using the business card he had given me, promising to provide free housing. I kept walking, making sure not to lead him back to my car or reveal my license plate. I stopped on the sidewalk at a crossroad, pretending to fiddle with my phone, while he continued in the opposite direction. Once he was out of sight, I quickly made my way to my car and drove away. The encounter left me feeling uneasy, although I acknowledged that it could have been a harmless interaction. However, the cumulative effect of his behavior and questions deeply unsettled me. To err on the side of caution, I decided to file a harassment police report. The officers initially seemed reluctant to take it seriously, but I insisted, thinking it was crucial to have a record just in case something happened to me or someone else in the future. A week or 2 later, I found myself in a different neighborhood at a shop. While waiting in the checkout line, I glanced behind me, and to my dismay, there he was again, the same man from before. I noticed that he wasn't holding anything to purchase. Trying to remain calm, I handed my items to the cashier and asked her to hold them momentarily. Then, I swiftly walked out to my car, ensuring that he hadn't followed me once more, and drove straight home. While it's possible that he may have seen me entering the store from the parking lot and decided to follow, I strongly suspected that he had already been inside and simply spotted me approaching from behind. Or maybe it was something entirely different. I couldn't say for sure. Reflecting on the situation, I still couldn't definitively determine if I had overreacted to a slightly peculiar, possibly homeless man, or if there was indeed a more sinister motive behind his actions. Regardless, I couldn't shake the feeling of unease. It was a reminder that personal safety should always be a priority, particularly for young individuals like myself. From that day forward, I became more cautious and aware of my surroundings. I adjusted my routines and took extra precautions, such as varying my routes, informing friends and family of my whereabouts, and staying vigilant in public spaces. While I hoped that the encounter was an isolated incident, I understood the importance of staying proactive and trusting my instinct. Years have passed since that unsettling encounter, and I've grown wiser and more experienced. Looking back, I realized that it was a pivotal moment that taught me valuable lessons about personal safety, the importance of reporting suspicious incidents, and the significance of listening to my intuition. Now, I share my story as a reminder to others to stay vigilant, trust their instinct, and prioritize personal safety. It's essential to recognize that even seemingly harmless interactions can have underlying risks, and it's better to take precautions than to ignore potential dangers. By sharing our experiences and raising awareness, we can create a safer environment for ourselves and those around us. I lived in a cozy suburban area within a small town. My house was conveniently situated close to my grandparents' place. The layout was simple. My house occupied one block, followed by a spacious church with a large parking lot on the next block, and finally, my grandparents' house on the subsequent block. During the summer, when our parents were at work, a few of my cousins and I would spend our days at our grandparents'. It truly made for a delightful childhood. When I turned around 11, my parents surprised us with a furry addition to the family, a dog. As part of my summer chores, I had the responsibility of walking back to my house to let the dog out for a bathroom break and then returning to my grandparents' place. My older cousin, who was a year older than me, always accompanied me on these walks. One fateful day, as we were heading back to my grandparents after letting the dog out, a car pulled up alongside us. In one swift movement, the driver flung his car door open and bellowed, "Gotcha!" Startled, my cousin and I bolted, our legs carrying us as fast as they could. The man swiftly closed his door and sped ahead of us, veering into the parking lot of the nearby church. Instead of running through the parking lot, we opted to take a detour behind the church, all while maintaining our course toward my grandparents' house. Emerging from the rear side of the church, we glanced back and saw the man still lingering in the church's parking lot. He had his head on a swivel, desperately searching for our whereabouts. Fear gripped us, but we pressed on, sprinting with all our might. A few heart-pounding moments later, he spotted us and we heard the screeching sound of his tires as he once again gave chase. Thankfully, we were in close proximity to my grandparents' house, and we darted inside, panting and breathless. We rushed to my grandmother and recounted the terrifying encounter, hoping for solace and understanding. However, she simply dismissed our tale, unable to believe such an alarming story. In her eyes, we were just kids with overactive imaginations, eager to disrupt her soap opera viewing. She urged us to go back outside and resume our playtime. Still shaken, neither my cousin nor I felt like playing. Instead, we settled on the front porch, seeking a sense of security in each other's company. Before long, the man drove by again, this time slowing down as he passed. Our anxiety peaked, and we hurriedly returned to my grandmother, insistent on sharing our experience once more. Finally, after we persisted for the third time, my grandmother stepped out onto the porch, coinciding with the man's reappearance. She promptly dialed the police, alerting them to the situation. While we anxiously awaited the arrival of the authorities, the man drove by yet again, and we quickly pointed him out to the police officer. The officer attentively listened to our accounts and took our statements. Afterward, he left, leaving us with a sense of uncertainty. We never crossed paths with that man again. I'd like to believe that the police officer intervened, pulling him over and instilling enough fear to deter him from bothering us or anyone else ever again. But deep down, I harbor doubts about the true resolution of the situation. Let me begin by describing my house so that you can better visualize the events that unfolded. As you approach the front of my house, you'll find a wooden door, which I refer to as the outside door. It opens and closes silently, without making any noise. Beyond that door is a medium-sized room with windows lining most of the walls. Then, there's another door that I call the middle door. This door has a distinct noise when you press down the handle, a loud click, and when you open it, it emits a squeaky sound that has persisted for years. Once you pass through the middle door, you'll enter a room with 3 other doors: the bathroom, the door leading to the kitchen, living room, and the door to the guest room. Following that room, there's yet another door. Upon opening it, you immediately see the kitchen and the living room if you look to the left. Now that you have a mental picture of the house, I can delve into the story. It happened 2 weeks ago, precisely at 10:24 p.m. I was sitting in the kitchen on one of the chairs by the dining table, engrossed in watching YouTube videos on my laptop. I had my headphones on. Suddenly, something peculiar occurred. I heard the slow, squeaky opening of the middle door. Instantly, I froze in place, fixated on the third door, overcome with shock and panic. I didn't know what to do. Moments later, as the middle door closed, I caught faint footsteps. Then, the guest room door opened. The handle of that door requires significant force to press, and when it's about halfway down, it makes a distinct CLONK sound before you can open it. I distinctly heard that sound. I was overwhelmed with fear, unable to move, as I worried that they might hear me. So, I remained still, waiting in what felt like an eternity. Then, I heard the footsteps again, but they were not approaching the door leading to the kitchen. They gradually faded away. Soon after, I heard the familiar squeak of the middle door, signaling that the person was likely leaving. Once the middle door closed, I mustered the courage to creep closer to the third door, pressing my ear against it. Strangely, I didn't hear anything. I assumed that the intruder had left my house. Very cautiously, I opened the third door, peering out of the window in the second room to catch a glimpse of the individual walking away. I saw a slightly older brown Jaguar parked behind my car, with its interior light on. Inside the Jaguar, there was another person seated in the driver's seat. The moment the person I had encountered got into the car, they swiftly reversed, reaching a point in my yard where they could turn their vehicle around to make their escape. As they reached the turning point, they turned on their headlights and sped away, leaving my house behind. Feeling a semblance of safety, I immediately dialed the emergency number in Finland, 112, and reported what had transpired. Living in the middle of nowhere, with the nearest neighbor approximately 4 kilometers away, and the town where I do my grocery shopping over 30 kilometers distant, it took some time for the police to arrive. While waiting for them, I inspected the guest room, only to find that it had been ransacked. All the cabinets were open, and the double bed was in disarray. Fortunately, nothing seemed to be missing. When the police finally arrived, I provided them with a detailed account of the entire incident. Regrettably, they couldn't take any action as they couldn't locate a brown Jaguar anywhere nearby. Moreover, I had never seen that car before, and it certainly didn't belong to my neighbor, who drives a Toyota Hiace van. It was a perplexing situation. Reflecting on the incident, I couldn't help but realize the importance of locking doors. Even when living in a secluded area, I had been careless by leaving them unlocked, and this incident served as a stark reminder of the potential risks. Thankfully, the intruders hadn't made their way into the kitchen or living room, which would have been far more unsettling. In the aftermath, I couldn't shake off the feeling of vulnerability and unease. The violation of my home and the thought of someone lurking around without my knowledge left me on edge. I took immediate steps to reinforce the security of my house. I installed sturdy locks on all doors, including the middle door, to prevent any unwelcome entry. Additionally, I decided to invest in a security system to provide an added layer of protection. Over time, the initial fear subsided and life returned to normal. However, I couldn't help but remain vigilant, constantly aware of the need to ensure my safety and the security of my home. The incident had taught me a valuable lesson, one that I would never forget. As for the intruders, their identity and motives remained a mystery. It was disconcerting to think that they had targeted my house specifically or if it was a random occurrence. Nevertheless, I was grateful that they had ultimately left without causing harm or stealing any valuables. Since that unsettling night, I made it a habit to always lock my doors, no matter where I live. It became a simple yet crucial act that provided peace of mind and ensured my well-being. The incident had awakened me to the reality that even in the quietest of places, one must never underestimate the importance of home security. And so, I continued to live my life, cherishing the comfort and sanctuary of my home while remaining vigilant and cautious, knowing that my personal safety and security were paramount. When I was just a young child, no more than 10 years old, I had an encounter that still sends chills down my spine. It was a typical day, and I was eagerly heading to the mailbox to collect the mail for my parents. Dressed in my complete baseball uniform, I was ready for a game. Little did I know that this walk would be far from ordinary. As I strolled along, a car suddenly pulled over, and an elderly woman called out to me, urging me to get into the car. Instantly, my instincts kicked in, and I sensed that something was terribly wrong. "Come on, we're going to be late," she insisted, trying to persuade me. She went on to say that my bat and glove were in the trunk, claiming that my dad had given them to her. According to her, my dad couldn't take me anymore, so he had asked them to give me a ride since they lived nearby. I wish I could recall exactly what I did in that moment, but the anxiety and confusion have blurred the memory. All I remember is the intense pressure of trying to make sense of the situation. I want to believe that I bolted and ran straight home, but as time has passed, the details have become hazy. I simply can't recall. What I do remember is being back at the house, feeling a sense of relief, and then experiencing a bone-chilling moment when the creepy old lady rang our doorbell. My dad, understandably puzzled, answered the door, and she proceeded to tell him that they were testing me, checking if I would willingly enter their car. The most unsettling part of this whole ordeal is that I can't quite recollect whether I actually got into their car or not. I'm not particularly old, but the rush of adrenaline and fear clouded my memory. When I try to piece it together, I can envision both outcomes, me sprinting home or me being inside their car. The lack of a scolding or reprimand from my parents makes me lean towards the former, but the uncertainty lingers. Regardless of their intention to test children, the mere thought of what they did sends shivers down my spine. What a twisted way to spend one's free time. It leaves me questioning whether this couple had ulterior motives beyond what they claimed. When I arrived home, I was so shaken that I couldn't bring myself to utter a word to my parents. The shock was still fresh, and I hadn't even processed what had just happened. Was the subsequent doorbell ringing some sort of cover-up, an attempt to deflect suspicion and avoid potential police involvement? Has anyone else ever experienced something similar? The whole incident leaves me deeply disturbed. After all, it's not every day you come across children walking alone in full baseball gear, and the elaborate story they concocted on the spot makes me believe this was not their first attempt to lure a child into their car.